Yeah, Yoruba demons.
And he just wanted someone
like
brand.
to point.
That's
I don't
all.
think he wanted her. I think he just wanted to mess with her head because it was right there. You know what? You guys are missing something. They just survived.
When he hugged her, I was like,
They just survived
Yeah.
the most epic battle ever. Everybody's head was upside down.
No.
Gendry was about to propose to Arya. She's like,
You
"No,
did,
I'm not
man.
a lady.
You
did.
I'm not a
You did.
lady." Freaking
dude,
Khaleesi
put him
for
in his
her.
boy spot, guys.
What you guys talking about, man? I just killed the Night King and the whole army.
But I can't wait for the final. The finale, it has to be worth it, though.
No, I'm now not looking forward to it because I feel like it's going to
Sometime
be a
sometime
Can I
later
shock
in
you?
life, I'm going to.
You know what the director said? That they're going to make sure they get drunk and switch off, unplug from all the
Can you
devices
blame
and
them?
internet, just to protect themselves from the backlash.
Can you blame them?
They know
They
what's
make their
coming.
money, man. So you guys can kiss their ass on Charles
And look, and they've already got prequels signed up. They've
Yes.
got stuff going on.
And you know there's a whole prequel that's left out. The whole Targaryen
That's what they're
story.
doing next.
There's a whole lot of stuff.
no time for all this work.
The headlines, the stories, the news.
Which is nice.
In-depth analysis of national current affairs.
Yeah, that's what you guys lock your.
Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.
All right. Studio is live. Mics are up. Studio silence, please.
I invest where money never sleeps.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us here on Smooth Breakfast with Ayo.
And Valentine.
And it's
good
time
morning.
for us, good morning, it's time for us to go into detailed analysis of our newspaper stories this morning inside of Freshly Pressed 981. Welcome. And joining us this morning, the wonderful trio for a Friday. We have, as ladies first, Uti Elu. I am Sivanti on Twitter. Good morning, Uti.
Good morning, Val. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning. And of course, Nwaji, he's at the corporate MC on Twitter. Good morning, Nwaji.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Ayo. And good morning, Lagos.
Good morning.
And not forgetting the big coops himself. That's his Twitter handle. His Tunde Okufi. Good morning.
Morning, guys.
Welcome. All right, let's get into the stories. But before that, a quick reminder of our WhatsApp number 0809-444-0981. That is the number to send messages to 0809-444-0981. On Twitter, we're at Smooth981FM. Please use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. Our first story is from the Punch newspaper. Paris Club refund is in the news again as the federal government is set to pay 649 billion naira final tranche to states. Wajid, your thoughts?
First and foremost, I don't know why they're calling it a refund. Credit to Textile for giving me the information regarding why this thing is even existing. So this is part of the legacy of the Basanjo regime as to when the debt management office was first set up, and then these were the debt forgiveness numbers and figures that were now meant to come back to Nigeria. So they're now finally coming back. So I don't know why they're calling it a refund, because the actual dictionary definition of refund is that
Something,
paid something
yes.
and it was returned. That's not the case. This is just money that's being distributed towards you. So it goes into the figures regarding how much is now going to go back to the states, etc., etc. But that's not the actual story, Valentine. The story here is that this is the issue with our states and their attitude and mentality towards IGR. I think we've talked about this before.
Yes.
Because let me now give like a quick analogy as to why we have these issues. When you have, or when you are a child of, let's say, an affluent family, whatever the case may be, and you happen to get information that when your parent, whoever's the person in charge of the funds, whatever the case may be, is going to pass away, X amount is going to be entrusted towards you. You have this sense of entitlement in your head that, okay, all I have to do is just wait until this person passes away and then I get this financial windfall. So what now happens is that depending on the longevity of that individual, you're going to spend so many years of your life basically doing nothing. You're just waiting for Godot to drop from heaven, from manna to fall from heaven, because what you're now just expecting is this windfall. So when states now begin to have this perspective that we are getting a quote-unquote refund from the Paris Club arrangements or whatever the case may be, we do not necessarily have to do anything. We don't have to now create systems and put in infrastructures and be creative and innovative to now begin to figure out how our states can generate revenue so that we can pay salaries and pay our bills and make sure we are viable in some kind of manner. So it's a cycle that is perpetual that's creating these issues, and this is what now feeds into it. Left to me, but obviously I'm not there, I will not distribute these funds to the state governments, so that you can force these individuals to not get their acts together and begin to get very, very, very serious regarding what generating revenue within their states actually mean. Because as long as they continue to receive these allocations, because what what now happened? Make sure they pay the backlog in salaries that are owed.
Mhm.
Make sure they pay their bills and everything else.
Mhm.
And then within a year or two, we're back to square one, when nothing now begins to happen, and then you now find a situation again where they're complaining about how they can't raise the minimum wage because they're not generating enough revenue. But this is why you're not generating enough revenue, because you keep getting handouts. So the psychology, the philosophy, and the mindset has to change in order for these things not to happen. What that money should be used for is to invest in capital projects, infrastructure projects in those states that are closely monitored by the federal government, to make sure you have development and also a creation of an enabling environment to allow the generation of revenue to occur. Not that you're going to give state governments that don't have the sense to actually begin to work on how to generate revenue, because they're just going to squander that money. Going back to that child analogy that I used.
So I have a question. Wonderful analogy, by the way. Perhaps, I mean, do you think the federal government does not or lacks the wherewithal to make it a conditional payment, like you said, if the states can prove themselves worthy by showing X and Y or Z amount of policies that they've implemented or ways to generate funds, internally generated revenue, and if a particular cap is met, and then they can now get the disbursed funds?
Valentine's an absolutely fantastic question, and it's one of those attitudinal things of meh, and that's just it. It's just like,
Well, okay.
I can't be bothered. It's a deliberate intent regarding how you approach it, right? And if you don't have that deliberate intent, then it doesn't become important to you.
Another aspect, Nwaji, is should the people suffer because of the inefficiencies of the state government? Because the price fund, the price fund is going to be used for old salaries, a backlog of salaries, and people are suffering. They say when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. Unfortunately, yes, it's a great idea for the federal government to encourage states to start to generate their own revenue, but in the interim, and for states that don't even care, what do we then do for the people who suffer?
I appreciate that sentiment. Trust me, it's very heartfelt, but we need to be very methodological regarding how we approach these things, because if we continue to bank on sentiments, and I'm loving the side eye that's I wish everybody could see it. If we continue to bank on sentiments, we will not get anywhere. So we need to make some very hard decisions and hard choices. Unfortunately, to use your elephants, the ground suffering analogy, these things will happen, but we have to get it right. So maybe what we can do is work out some percentage that specifically goes towards tackling the hardships that people have, gone through, to make sure that's taken care of.
That's a good compromise.
Okay, and then you can now begin to focus on the larger components, but you cannot continue to feed this perpetual madness, because it's just only going to continue.
Well, the madness is showing up in the next story as the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, yesterday confirmed that Nigeria's downstream oil sector had receded in the last 20 years, especially in the refining utilization. They gave examples of some countries in sub-Saharan Africa, which apparently is the hardest hit. They said some countries are actually making efforts, all producing countries precisely, to ensure that their petroleum products have the capacity to be exported, but downplayed Nigeria's efforts in thriving in other sectors. But your thoughts on this, Tunde?
Well, downplayed. It was focused on commodities, so I can see where the Guardian is. This is the Guardian's attempt at patriotic journalism, in a sense. This is the UN stating the obvious. It's like someone going over your report card years after they know you flunked to the exam, right? It's clear. We don't need anyone to tell us that.
Why you fail?
We don't need anyone to tell us that our refining capacity has dropped. We all know. We pay huge subsidies. We know that our Commonwealth, a lot of our Commonwealth goes towards paying subsidies because we import fuel. And bottom line, this is what the report highlights. Now, the main focus of the report, because obviously states obvious, is it's more focused on commodity dependence, and saying that, look, when your country is heavily dependent on commodities, which is you produce something, sell commodities as opposed to services. There are countries that don't have a commodity to sell. Their economy is focused on services. There are numbers to mention. There is Singapore. There's Israel. There are many nations that don't have a natural resource. I think Japan as well. But because of the services that they offer, and in manufacturing and a bunch of other things, they thrive. They don't have any extractive commodities to put out there. Now, if the definition by the UN is if more than 60% of your income is based on commodities, then you're viewed as somewhat at risk. And we know that we're heavily dependent on crude. So that's really essentially what the report is saying, and saying that you need to try to diversify that and move away from that. It points out a bunch of also interesting things. It mentions that we've lost 551 billion naira from January to December 2015 from this decline in or this ability not to refine petroleum.
Yes,
products ourselves. So again, this is someone analyzing the obvious. It's
Yes, but I mean, with the Dangote refinery coming on stream soon, and I say soon carefully, would you think that would change?
yeah, Dangote for the
It's just one man, one company.
yeah, Dangote.
All right, let's take
Well,
some comments on WhatsApp. Benga Komo responding to the Paris Fund story says the monies that had been given to the states before from the fund. What happened to them? It was mismanaged, and this is another windfall. And then Obi from Apapa says it hurts to think that Nigeria can be so much more than what we have become. We're so focused on consumption to our continued detriment. The Paris Fund will go the same way IMF and other funds have gone, towards consumption. A lot of our governors still view capital projects as buying pepper grinders and tricycles.
And building toilets.
and commissioning wells.
Okay, wells.
Wow, it's a feel good Friday, guys. Let's hope this actually just lights or improves our mood now. From New Telegraph, I'll come to you, T, for this one. Kidnapping. It seems like the operatives associated with Operation Puff Adder are talking about the police force in partnership, or rather, in conjunction with the efforts they're making at ensuring that they stem the tide of crime, especially in the areas of kidnapping. They've announced success in arresting 93 people and some weapons that were recovered in the operation. They said that they recovered rocket launchers and about 45 AK-47 rifles in parts of the northeast, north central, and northwestern parts of Nigeria. Your thoughts?
Well, it's nice that this is called Operation Puff Adder, because the first thing I thought when I read this is another police puff piece. There's really nothing here.
What does Puff Adder mean?
Well,
It's a snake.
is
yeah.
it? Oh, it's an
Yeah,
actual
it
type
is.
of snake.
Yeah, it
Oh,
is.
fantastic. Well, there you go. there's a sting and there's a
Something
bite to
every
it,
day, yeah.
you know. But this is really what the police does best. So they come and they dangle these few little key bits of information that will get people all riled up. Where we found this, number of.
But it's positive news.
That's a puff piece.
Okay.
It's positive.
All
It's
right.
great. But let's look at what's actually happening and what this speaks to. You've gone and found 93 unfortunate people that somebody else has put rifles in their hands, and they've gone out, they're committing crimes. But what are you actually doing? It's great. Don't get me wrong. They've taken them off the streets. That will at least operationally reduce the amount of kidnappings that are happening. But where are the funds for these rifles and arms coming from?
Yes.
What's the source of the arms? Several times on this show, we've talked about different catchments of arms that have turned up at ports and things like that. They need to do more than just pick up the foot soldiers. You need to go after the head of the snake. You need to find out where this money is coming from, what the source is. Then you can really come and write a real piece that tells us about what you're doing to stop this problem. I mean, it's great that they have done that. The 93 people that they've picked off the street, what's the plan for them? Are you just going to put them into our corrections facilities? Are you just going to hold them off? Where's the rehabilitation? What's going to happen in that part of the country to really address this from the core? You're going to educate. There has to be a lot more to this. I know from the police perspective, theirs is just to fight crime. So go, yay police.
Uti, I absolutely love where your mind is at with this story, because I was just about to ask you. I mean, really, it doesn't rain arms and ammunition in Nigeria. It comes from, there's a channel. So what I would love to see is have some of the identify maybe the ringleaders among these lots, and then interrogate them to find the source, because it seems to be an arms proliferation in Nigeria. There's existence, and there's a cartel.
Yeah.
Whether I like it or not.
Well, Valentine, if you trace it, this thing always happens after every election cycle. When you now begin to look at the data regarding this proliferation of arms that comes into Nigeria, it happens after every election cycle. Why? Because arms are distributed during the election season to thugs on the heads of politicians who are vying for office.
But who are these people?
I just told you who the people are.
No, where's it coming from?
What do you mean where is it coming from? They import it. They smuggle it in. So it's not. We don't need to do any hard investigations. We all know the data. We all know the truth. It's just everybody just turns their blind eye and act like we don't know what it is.
And there's some basics. I mean, it even also speaks to like locally produced arms. I'm not a detective, but I mean, come on, you should be able to find these things if you're really trying to do something about this. You might not be able to get to the politicians yet, but at least try and find the local guys who are producing these things, and then you work your way up to tracing where those funds are coming from.
Right. Thank you very much, Uti and Nwaji. From this the newspaper, Nwaji, I'll come back to you for this one. Federal government to reassess commercial value of mineral resources brings us back to the Paris Club refund conversation and how we should divest the revenue generation formula. Well, look through this story, please share with us.
Yeah, y'all trying to like work my last black nerve in this place today. What does that mean? Reassess the commercial value. I don't know to make.
So our president went to Morocco.
Yeah, I know. So I'm trying to be calm before recalculate. Okay.
Possibly.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Look at it again.
Re-examine, re-evaluate.
okay, let me just try to be calm.
Okay.
We've had these mineral resources well before the discovery of oil. And as a matter of fact, these mineral resources were huge industry players in this country prior to 1956, when the Shell Petroleum Development Corporation discovered oil in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Just for quick historical context. So I don't know why we are acting like these things don't exist. What happened to Nigeria was the Dutch disease, aka the curse of the black gold. And we got that taste of oil and we all went absolutely berserk. And we have been suffering from that disease for the last almost 60-something years. That's why we have this issue. So for you to now come out and say you are trying to reassess because of diversification purposes is ridiculous. There's nothing to reassess. How about you invest in those particular industries? How about you now make sure you put the proper plays in place? You begin to mine and get these things out of the ground and now hit a commercial viable business model plan that now begins to take place. Let the market forces now dictate what the unit prices will be. And then you have an economy that's outside of oil. I don't know why we like to act like these things are rocket science.
Well, I guess you have to reassess to reinvest.
To reinvest before you put money in something, you really need to find out if it's profitable, if you have the infrastructure in place, if you have the people that have the expertise.
No. That's my point. We keep acting like these things are academic, intellectual exercises. How about we just get intentional and do them? There are enough people.
But bro, the other day you heard about the news of Osun State Governor going with the NDLEA chairman to Thailand to find out how we can reevaluate how.
If you want to take a walk, take a walk. There's no point in planning to take a walk.
Thank you. That's my point. If you want to stop talking about them. It's like losing weight or trying to get in shape. You keep saying, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Or when I win the lottery, but you never buy the lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Come on.
I think it's like what Uti mentioned earlier on with regards to we getting reports like this. Exciting headlines, exciting
Puff
prospects.
pieces,
And we want to see, I think we have to get to a point where we see substance. So what is being reported is what has been done.
Yes.
Not the
Thank you,
intention.
Ayo. Thank you.
Oftentimes we get intentions being reported, and I think a lot of our news stories today are about intentions. So just get ready. We're just started.
And occasionally, just one more point. We're so reactive. The reason why the federal government is beginning to pay attention to this again is because there's a lot of mining activity going on already.
Yes.
It's illegal, it's unstructured.
Yeah.
So finally they're like, okay.
There's money here.
It's beyond that, they've known there's money. But now that it's things are happening, the government doesn't have a control on things as much as it used to. Security is one example.
And that's it.
So a bunch of people do all sorts of economic things that are not right. Now there's a spotlight on it, and we're reacting on it.
So, and to Tunde's exact point, you can trace that reactionary perspective. Sorry, guys. And the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is because when they now began to discover that people were illegally mining in certain parts of the regions that was now causing earthquakes. You guys remember that a few months ago? That's when the government was like, oh crap, we need to step in. And they now stepped in and to Tunde's point, now discovered that there was mining activity happening that was completely unregulated, that they had no control over. And furthermore, these guys that were mining were cashing commodities. So now the government's like, oh, snap.
Okay.
I want some of that. That's exactly what this is.
And then first send them out. The foreigners. Remember those foreigners?
So it's all connected. You can all just follow the money, man. That's it.
Right. We'll take some comments, one or two, before we go on to our next story. Samuel from Lekki.
It says 93 arrested with weapons. What next after that? Hope we won't see these people again in society, as with others like them arrested and reintegrated into the society, while petty criminals are left to rot in jails awaiting trial.
All right, let's move on to our next story. Uti, I'll come to you for this. At last, National Assembly OKs June 12 as Democracy Day. Guardian. It seems like a straightforward story, but because I heard the debate yesterday about, okay, so what happens on May 29? Why June 12?
Let us go home, man.
So can you please break this down to us? Looking at the National Holiday Act amended from the Nigerian Constitution, what's the implication of 12th of June being our new Democracy Day?
So thanks, Aya. So this is really a culmination. If we remember last year, right after May 29th, there was this hoopla. Buhari came out and announced, I think it was June 6th, that he was moving Democracy Day from May 29th to June 12th to commemorate the activities of that day. I know for myself personally, I thought, oh, there's another public holiday coming. Finally, I don't work for a state government, but I can get this one. But this really is a culmination of that announcement, really putting in place the legislation behind that. To your question around the difference between May 29th and June 12th, May 29th still stands as the official handover date. So on that day, the new governments are going to get sworn in. So, and again, my thought was, okay, this is double celebration. So again, places to loot funds and move funds, people. But it's going to be a smaller sort of just do the official stuff. And then on June 12th, we then celebrate as a nation together what Democracy Day really stands for. But I mean, again, there was a lot of talk last year when they announced this as to whether it was just sort of nice to have.
It was an election move.
So it was, exactly.
I mean, the Southwest have called for this. We have been having June 12 as Democracy Day at state level. So it's just moving to federal level.
Absolutely.
Another aspect is that on May 29, it will be every 4 years, while June 12 will be every year, so that's annually. While May 29, so for those who are asking, there will still be a swearing-in ceremony. And according to the state governor, it depends on how elaborate he's feeling or how generous to see how big or small the ceremony will be. But it's meant to be smaller than the bigger one on June 12.
And talking about state governors, I earlier mentioned the governor that went to Thailand is actually Ondo State governor. Just on. Anyway.
That's what to be afraid.
Yes,
that's the guy.
Thank you, Emeka.
All right. Okay. So, Uti, I'll stay with you for this one. CBN inaugurates committee. Talking about committee's intentions, and now this is the textile industry. This day has it that to revive 50 textile firms by 2023. First question I'll ask you before I take on the stories. 50 by 2023, is that conservative? Is that enough? And should we, what is this another committee that's been set up? Would it be actualized, in reality? Please take us through this story.
What did we just say about communicating intent? This is another this is another fantastic story around communicating intent. It is a good intent. I think that we need to start to look at, go beyond the curse of the black gold and what we can really do to improve our economy. And textiles is a huge one. I remember as a child going on excursions to textile factories, and it was fantastic to see it. So to see that industry has died in less than 30 years is really quite sad. You're down to a workforce of the entire industry of about 20,000. So
what?
Yeah. Entire textile, 20,000 only. And this is a sort of a human resource heavy type industry. So that's not even a drop in the ocean. But this 2023, 50, it's conservative, but I think that we might even struggle to achieve that because there's so much that it will take to actually achieve this. There's infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad that in the report they mentioned power. One of the big deterrents to manufacturing in Nigeria. When we're talking about this, shouldn't we be lobbying? I know we almost want to give up on it. We don't talk about it anymore. Let's just accept our lots. Our power is never going to happen, but we cannot, stand for that.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned infrastructure.
Yeah, so infrastructure, before you even get to power, so you look at the production, so the cotton growers, and you look at the factories and the processing. So you have so if you go more further into the story, it sort of talks about allowing the importation of cotton lint itself up until I think 2020. So that's going to allow sort of the process of manufacturers to continue the work. But before you even get to that, you have to look at the people who are actually growing the cotton. What are you going to do to support that part of the industry? You're providing ceilings, you're providing education. You have to put standards in place. We have lots of other agricultural industries that produce products that are exported widely, but we can't export them here because we don't meet the standards. So we have to also, this has to start from there to look at that. And then you have your farmers access to finance is another thing. So what are you going to do? He's talked about in the past, Emefiele has talked about single digits financing for them and loans and making it easy. But we also know that it's not just about talking about it. How easy are these people going to be able to meet the criteria for the loans? There's so many.
And are the loans available yet?
So he's even claiming that they are, but they're going to support them. But then it's one thing to say, I want to give you a loan. It's another thing for you to be able to meet the criteria to get the loan. And we know that these sectors are largely unstructured. They're not formal. So there's a lot that goes into this. So it is conservative by 2023 to be able to achieve this. They're saying they want to do 20 in the 2019 fiscal year. I think that's almost impossible. But let's see where they're going to take it. There's really a lot. If you look at the 2017 figures for our exports in cotton, we did just over $6 million. If you take inflation into on top of that, it just gives you a sense of how much that industry could really be worth to us if we really sort of invested in it.
Right, thank you very much. Talking about committees, another one is being inaugurated today. Let's talk about the human rights violations, claim with regards to the defense HQ in particular, as they have sought or they're going to inaugurate a committee on rules of engagement. Take us through this story,
Rules
please.
of
Another
engagement.
committee,
Look, and all I see is sitting allowances, to be honest. Okay,
optimistic.
so no, I am being optimistic. I mean, some people are getting fed.
Okay, all right.
Just not all of us, not the rest of us.
Go on.
Okay, so the biggest thing for me and where I have the biggest concern and the clear reason why we are where we are, again, I have to point back to that reactive nature and how we not only do not plan for the future, we just don't pay certain things attention, and what you find important you will pay attention to. This is very clear. Following the allegations of, like you said, of human rights, these allegations are not new. They've been against us for years, even from OD down to now, Obasanjo's time to now. And it's well documented and it's clear. So they're not allegations, right? Well, you can still call them, they're confirmed cases, but of abuse of human rights. And the defense headquarters on Thursday inaugurated a high-powered committee, according to it, to collate and review its rules of engagement. Isn't this supposed to be an ongoing thing? After every single operation, literally after every single day, shouldn't there be a review of this is what happened? And this story also covers police.
Yes.
In professional police forces, they review every single engagement,
It's
every
called an
assessment.
It's called an after action.
After you have to, it's mandatory. Did you do the right things? Were you should you have discharged your weapon? How did you use your weapon? How did you bring this person down? We don't do any of that. So why we, the same way we say our laws are cake, it's the same thing. These rules are probably the rules of engagement that the military used are the same ones that the colonialists used on us.
Well,
And we've just taken it on. I find it very important to raise that, because we review it now. It's not the Ten Commandments. It's not a tablet. It's supposed to be a living document. If there is a document at the end of this, it's supposed to be continuous. So it's not enough for them.
Public, if once they establish it, or once they produce the rule of engagement, should it be made public for us to know?
That may help, but all of that is enshrined with. It's like saying, okay, the memorandum of human rights, they're public now.
Yes.
Do you enjoy or do the police and or the military conduct or treat everyone they engage with using the human rights? We all know what they are, basic human rights, but we don't engage with it. Now, look, the other thing to point out is, and it's a long article talking about the armed forces should engage, how the police should engage, and talking about them standing up the rule of law, because this is not new. There are certain laws in place now, but are we obeying them? And to that, I'll say, if we take a look at the posture of the present administration as regards the rule of law, isn't it a bit selective? And everything cascades down from the top. If you're not sticking, it's either you stick to the rule of law and apply it judiciously
Yeah.
and in every single case. And
So
then
it's
all of that
sacrosanct.
sort of, exactly, law is sacrosanct. Then it comes down. But it's good. It points on, there's a lot of mention about SARS. We can't go into everything. The final thing that I'd like to state is reading this article and going through the story, one thing stands out. Committees have been inaugurated. None of the key officers were actually present. No one. All of them were represented by someone else, and that to me is a clear example of how seriously we actually do take this. It's another puff piece. It's another, it's a bandage. It's something put out there to make it look nice.
All right. I have messages here. Rotimi Road says, good morning. You do not indicate if June 12th is now also a public holiday in
It
addition
is.
to May
It
29th.
is.
Not in addition to May 29th.
He just needed a reminder to
May
be sure that
29th,
there's an
you'll be
extra
at
day.
work.
No, May 29 actually. Every 4 years it's recognized and celebrated.
Oh, really?
It's not a
You'll be at
holiday,
work. It's
just
not a
swearing in.
holiday.
It's very
Mm.
Oh,
It's
it's
just
taken
swearing in,
as-
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're hoping it was another leap year. And we're done with the show. Apologies to the messages we couldn't take because of time, but we do appreciate every one of you for sending in and contributing to the show. And special thanks to Nwaji at the corporate MC, Tunde at Big Coops, and Utsi Elu at IM Sivanti. Check them out on Twitter and ask whatever questions that you had left for the show. Well, we do appreciate every one of you. I will encourage you to join us next as we talk sports with the cynical Tega. Here